for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football.
Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Nearly 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 17th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 23 years of excellence, Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts, Brian Eikenberry and Andy Hall.
Week 16, separating the men from the boys. For some of you, this is the week all that time and energy can pay off big with that fantasy championship. For the rest of you, week 16 may as well be your Super Bowl because week 17 is the biggest crapshoot of the entire NFL schedule. Welcome to 515 Fantasy Football Show. Champ Andy Hall, joined as always by Brian Eikenberry. You still alive in any of your leagues, Brian?
Unfortunately, I am not. I am completely toasted and roasted. There's been some very important injuries in the middle or beginning of games that have just absolutely cost teams their position, their fight for the championship, and it has just been absolutely demoralizing this year.
Well, if you're losing, it's one of two reasons. The injury's one of them. The second reason would be David Johnson, Antonio Brown, or any number of players that absolutely went off in Week 15. If you were facing one of those guys, as I was in one of my leagues, you are sitting on the sidelines here in the Fantasy Champ. I'm still alive in one of my leagues. My 8-team league in its debut season, I'm still alive. But everything else, Brian, I'm just a spectator at this point. So.
Well, and that's the fun thing about fantasy football is sometimes you can do everything right, and it ultimately comes down to what your opponent has done, and if they made the right choices, and if they're listening to this program.
Yeah, notice I didn't mention that as one of the reasons you might lose. I mean, in fact, the reason you're still listening is because you're still alive, and that's partially, I would like to think, because you're listening to this show. There you go. No matter how you stumbled across us, iTunes, Stitcher, the Libsyn website, or maybe you're hearing us on 1350 ESPN Radio in Des Moines, we thank you. We can't wait to give you the information that will ultimately lead you to fantasy gold this weekend. Plenty of ways to get a hold of Brian and myself. 515 Fantasy Football on Facebook, at 515 Fantasy on Twitter, 515fantasy@gmail.com if you want to drop us an email. Busy hour ahead, all the matchups and grades on the fantasy relevant players, the pop quiz, the bargain bin, and Brian's rendition of Neil Diamond's greatest hits in the key of E sharp as well.
I try.
It's all there. But we begin, as we always do, with some headlines of fantasy note. The Giants going to be without Odell Beckham Jr., who has been suspended for Sunday night's game in Minnesota for conduct unbecoming in last week's game against Carolina. Ugly.
That was just pathetic. And to watch him kind of crumble like that and just completely lose everything and target another player in such a manner. And you can compare it to a lot of people, and I'll even go as far as Sue never did anything that stupid.
No, and if you ask me, I think I'm on the same page with you. I think the one-game suspension is way too light. I'm surprised they didn't make it more than one game.
Yeah, I think since he is a first offender for something like that, I think that's why it is the one game. But you can pretty much rest assured that if he does anything like that or is suspected, it's going to be even worse.
Of course, through the Giants, he profusely apologized for his conduct. He did not, however, offer any apologies to Josh Norman nor the Carolina Panthers. Melvin Gordon placed on season-ending IR. Donald Brown looks to get the early down back roll for San Diego going forward. Also for San Diego, wide receiver Stevie Johnson. He's questionable to return for Thursday night's game. He's got that groin injury that's kept him out for a couple of weeks. The Broncos have named Brock Osweiler their starting quarterback for Week 16. This does not surprise either of us, Brian.
No, it doesn't. And, when it really comes down to it and you look at it, he gives them the best chance to win, and especially now this late in the season where they must win to maintain position.
Panthers running back Jonathan Stewart, questionable for this Sunday with a foot injury. He might miss this game, and that means probably more of that running back by committee quagmire, I'll call it, that the Panthers had rolling last week. Bengals tight end Tyler Eifert still in the league's concussion protocol. They're saying he's likely going to be out until playoff time. Wide receiver A.J. Green dealing with a back issue. He should be good to go this weekend, which is good news for his owners. Drew Brees believed to have a torn plantar fascia. Now, this is the same exact injury that Peyton Manning supposedly suffered. However, Drew Brees is reportedly intent on playing this weekend. I'm not sure that's a smart idea for a team that's really not playoff bound.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, of course, he should want to play, and of course, he should expect to play. But what the doctors and team leadership expect is probably something completely different.
Bills running back LaShawn McCoy has a partially torn MCL. That probably means a bigger role for Carlos Williams and or Mike Gillislee, a subject we will talk about a little later on in the show. Wide receiver Robert Woods placed on season-ending IR. He's got a groin injury. Adrian Peterson, sounds like he'll be fine for Week 16 after injuring his ankle last Sunday. Apparently, he's also dealing with some sort of a shoulder ailment. Patriots wide receiver Danny Amendola injured his knee. He's out for the remainder of the fantasy playoffs, unfortunately. Wide receiver Brandon LaFell limited in practice Wednesday with an injured foot. He's questionable for Sunday. Good news for Julian Edelman owners. He might actually play this Sunday. And I'm not surprised by that, Brian. This is a big divisional game. They're playing the Jets on the road. And for that matter, Brady really kind of needs him.
Yeah, if you're just kind of watching that on the sidelines, especially if you're a Tom Brady owner, you really want this to come back and happen just to see it. It's two completely different teams, and with all the injuries they're suffering at running back, they really need that number one piece to get back in there.
Not that I think it'll matter from a fantasy standpoint, but the Patriots have signed veteran running back Steven Jackson. Texans quarterback T.J. Yates placed on season-ending IR with a torn ACL. That means it's probably Brandon Weeden time, as Brian Hoyer's not quite back yet after his second concussion in just a couple of months' time. Wide receiver Cecil Shorts considered day-to-day with a groin injury. Titans quarterback Marcus Mariota, he's expected to miss time with an injured MCL. Wide receiver Kendall Wright's season is over with fractured ribs. Andrew Luck already ruled out for Week 16. Jags running back Denard Robinson sprained his foot last Sunday. He says he'll play this weekend. TJ Yeldon, probably not. Cowboys have announced Kellen Moore will start Week 16 at quarterback. Oh, how the mighty have fallen in Dallas. And finally, Niners running back Sean Drawn did not practice Wednesday. He's questionable for Sunday with a knee injury, and that's very unfortunate because, Brian, we just are running out of players to talk about from San Francisco in general.
Yeah, well, you know what? That'll probably be just a really quick matchup then and save us some time.
No doubt. We begin with Thursday night football. I've got San Diego, Oakland. We begin on the Chargers side with Phillip Rivers, who I give a B+ to. And I'd feel a lot better about him this week if he had a few more reliable weapons in the passing game. Gates and Woodhead are about it, really, unless Stevie Johnson is able to return to the field this week. It is notable that Phillip threw for over 300 yards and 3 scores the last time these teams met. Danny Woodhead is a B-. The Raiders are a very mediocre run defense, allowing just over 100 yards per game on the ground. They've been good against pass-catching backs on the year, but Woodhead is coming off a career day versus Miami in Week 15. Donald Brown, I'm probably just going to leave on the bench this week. I'm also going to sit all of the Chargers receivers, unless Stevie Johnson plays, in which case I'll give him a C. Not much else to like here otherwise. Antonio Gates is an A, one of the best tight end plays of the week, in my opinion. Over to the Raiders side and Derek Carr, a B+, a good, not great matchup against a Chargers defense that gives up only 237 passing yards per game, less than 20 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position in standard scoring leagues. Much of that, I'm sure, is due to how awful the Chargers' run D is. Teams aren't having to pass so much. Latavius Murray is a B. The Chargers give up the 5th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. They allow over 120 yards on the ground per game to opposing runners. Latavius went for 85 and a touch first time around. That's probably not asking too much of him here in Week 16. The receivers, Amari Cooper, a B+. He went off on the Chargers the last time he faced them. 133 yards and a touchdown, maybe his ceiling in this matchup, but the good news is his floor isn't extremely low either. He's a good play. Michael Crabtree, a C+. He definitely has cooled off some, but remains a viable flex option despite a relatively tough matchup here. Tight end Clive Walford, I'll give a C to. This is a good matchup, but he's just not seeing the volume and may not here either, as the Raiders figure to spend plenty of downs running the ball and finding open wide receivers as opposed to that tight end.
Let me ask you a quick question here. If you were the owner of the Chargers and your team was probably going to move to Los Angeles and you had no receivers, would you just say heck with it and sign Randy Moss and Terrell Owens for your wide receivers for the rest of the season?
For as much money as you'd have to pay them, I'm not sure you could recoup that cost in ticket sales, unfortunately. So my answer is no.
All right,
a good idea.
All right, then. On to the Redskins-Eagles. Quarterback Kirk Cousins. I'm going to give him a B+ this week. 22 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. He doesn't have crazy stats, but his matchup cries victory. If you've been watching him play, some good things are starting to get a little bit of momentum. Plus, he's playing the Eagles. Running back Alfred Morris, he's going to get a B. He had 84 yards last week, but if you factor in he had a 49-yard run career long, that he's got the bulk of the carries, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. Matt Jones, B- if he goes. He's gimped up, so he's not testing it. Make sure to watch him through the injury wire through the weekend. It doesn't look like he's going to go, but just keep an eye on that. Wide receiver Deshaun Jackson, I'm going to give him an A. He has been proving time and time again how he can get open and make some great cuts in the open field. Watching him play at a high level is so great. I absolutely love watching Deshaun Jackson, and especially when Kirk Cousins is actually getting him the ball. So Deshaun Jackson, A. The only other option that I see that should be on your fantasy roster in your starting lineup right now is tight end Jordan Reed. He is getting an A. Touchdown machine is a covered nightmare. He's getting plenty of targets. And he has 2 touchdowns last week in the exact same situation. So make sure you watch out. Jordan Reed, if you got him, drop him in quickly. Onto the Eagles, quarterback Sam Bradford, C-. Redskins have an average pass defense, and Bradford's not going to get any points until the end of the game in garbage time. And you can't always count on garbage time regardless. And he nearly has a 1-for-1 touchdown to interceptions ratio. So Bradford is a no-go for me. Running back DeMarco Murray, D for don't. He had 2 carries last week. That was pretty sweet. Running back Ryan Matthews, C-. He had 50 yards. I understand game flow, but wow, it was just a terrible, terrible performance. Wide receiver Jordan Matthews on the other side of the ball, the supposed number 1 receiver, my biggest letdown in the wide receiver category this year, is going to get a B. He is the garbage time king, and he might as well be the Jared Cook of wide receivers. There's no other. Yeah, that's true, though. Look at it. Look at his numbers. He either gets 2 points or 22 points. There's no other wide receiver on the Eagles rosters that I'm going to trust in my championship lineup or any tight end that I'm going to wind up starting on the Eagles roster.
I wish I owned some Deshaun Jackson this week. You're forgetting one angle here, the fact that he used to be a Philadelphia Eagle.
Ooh, yeah, that's right.
This is going to be a huge game for Jackson. That's no doubt about that. My next matchup is San Francisco at Detroit. Begin on the Niners side. Blaine Gabbert, I'm laying on the bench this week. Sean Drawn as well. He's extremely questionable with a knee injury. Anquan Bolden, a B-, the only Niners wideout worth mentioning. Bolden gets the vast majority of the looks from Gabbert in between the 20s. He's just not hitting the end zone, which is unfortunate. The only other Niner I will mention is Vance McDonald. I give him a B. Sleeper tight end this week. The Lions have been pretty bad against them all season long. And Vance, when he is healthy, catches touchdowns. It's what he does. Over to the Lions side, Matthew Stafford is an A. Another high-volume game expected this week against a Niners secondary that ranks 26th in passing yards allowed. Joik Bell and Amir Abdullah, I'm leaving on the bench. There may be a rushing TD scored by the Lions here, but these 2 guys are splitting carries right down the middle. It'll be impossible to say who gets it. Theo Riddick, I'll give a C to, especially if you get a full point per reception, a nice option to look at for your flex position. Golden Tate gets an A this week. He's trending up big time, just in time for that fantasy championship. I wouldn't be shy using him wherever you have him, especially in a plus matchup like this one. Calvin Johnson. Now here's the deal, Brian. You're a Lions fan. What do you think of me giving Calvin Johnson a C+ this week?
I think that would be very accurate, as people who didn't listen to me last week, who asked me for personal advice on the side, failed miserably.
Yeah, I'm more than concerned with his lack of usage in recent weeks. It's quite possible that he's more banged up than they're leading on and actually kind of being used as a decoy until he can get healthy. I'm looking at other options personally if I'm a Megatron owner. And that's unfortunate because he's one of the guys that no doubt got you here. Tight end Eric Ebron is a C+. He's kind of boomer bust depending on Detroit's game plan. At least the tight end platoon is over for now. It's all Ebron, so he's getting all of those targets, but I'm still kind of mediocre on him.
Yeah, man, it's just one of those things where Ebron, he was drafted so high to be so great, but he is hot and cold so often. It's kind of annoying. And but he's still better than Jared Cook, so that's good.
No doubt.
On to the Steelers-Ravens. Quarterback Big Ben, obvious A here against a terrible Ravens squad. And the Steelers are going to pour it on. They're riding high, and they're just going to keep at it. That's how Tomlin plays. That's how Big Ben plays. They don't care if they're up 28 points. They're still going to chuck the ball if they want to. As evidenced by that 3rd and 1 last week when I'm like, he's going to pass it, and they passed it. So I even fooled everybody. Running back D'Angelo Williams, he's going to get an A here. It's going to be pretty easy here. He's averaging 4.5 yards per carry. He's going to get fed the ball plenty of times, in addition to Big Ben throwing it 35 or 40 times. So it's a great opportunity to start D'Angelo Williams. Wide receiver Antonio Brown, he's an A, obviously, because he's Antonio Brown. He can't be stopped. It's impossible. He has like 1,360 yards right now. Awesome. Oh, by the way, he also had some... What's his name? Oh, yeah, Michael Vick throwing to him, where there's 1 or 2 weeks where he only had 30 yards. So imagine if he had those 2 weeks back. It'd be crazy. Wide receiver Martavis Bryant, he's going to get a B. As much as everything goes to Brown, there's still plenty of leftovers for Bryant here, especially against the Ravens here. And if they do decide to try and quadruple team Antonio Brown, that means Bryant's going to be open. They're 15th against the pass, so not a disgusting matchup by any means. And the only one here, tight end Heath Miller, I'm going to give him a C. Yeah, it's really kind of sad. If I've looked at the last 4 games, it's been minimal at best. So if you have a better option here in your flex or something, if your roster's kind of crippled, just get away from Heath Miller. It's not looking good for him at all. Quarterback for the Ravens, it's going to be Jimmy Clausen, that guy who used to be behind Cam Newton. So B-. Running back Buck Allen, he's going to get a C because of game flow. The Ravens are likely to be behind, and they're going to have to pass. And Buck Allen is just not the person who we thought he was going to be in the passing game. Wide receiver Kamar Aiken, I'm going to give him a B here. He's the only threat, so expect some heavy coverage, but is the only one they're going to be chucking the rock to. I don't expect any tight end to pick here. They're kind of rotating through these no-name guys. So I would expect the Steelers really just to clamp down, but I got a feeling Jimmy Clausen's going to be maybe in the bargain bin, maybe 1 or 2 other of these guys.
All right, on to the Cowboys and the Bills. On the Cowboys side, Kellen Moore is your starting quarterback, definitely leaving him on the bench. Darren McFadden, I'm going to give him a B. Not a terrible play against a bottom third rush defense that's been trending down quickly as the end of the regular season nears. He should get lots of touches, and he has been getting lots of touches here recently. Des Bryant is a C. If I didn't feel great about playing him with Matt Castle under center, I'm downright nauseous when Kellen Moore is throwing the rock. Cole Beasley, he's been limited in practice this week. He's the only other player I would consider if he's active, but I give him a C-. It's just not pretty. Jason Witten, a B-. He hasn't scored since week 1. He's starting to look like the tortoise trying to race the hare out there against some of these quick linebacker types that are covering him. All he really has going for him at this point is size and experience. No doubt one of the greatest to ever play the position, but simply put, he's just getting older. Fact of life. On to the Bills side, Tyrod Taylor, a C+. The Cowboys are actually really good against the pass and have been much of the season. They are susceptible to quarterbacks that can run, like Taylor, but unless he gets into the end zone, I wouldn't grade him any higher than I've got him here at C+. Carlos Williams is a B+. Dallas typically gives up about 110 yards per game on the ground. 1 or 2 touchdowns. Williams may inherit the lion's share of McCoy's workload in his absence. Floor looks pretty secure, but ceiling somewhat limited by Gillislee's presence. Of course, I'm talking about Mike Gillislee, who I'm giving a C+ to this week. He's reached the end zone in the last 2 games, including a nice long run last week. He will figure into this week's game plan with McCoy likely out. Sammy Watkins is an A-. He's been one of the best fantasy wide receivers of the last month, not named Antonio Brown. That's really it for the receivers, and I can't find any tight ends of fantasy note either, so that's the end of that matchup.
We're just cruising through these bad boys. On to the Bears-Bucks here. Should be a sweet barn burner of a game. Quarterback Jay Cutler, I'm going to give him a B here. The Bucks looked absolutely terrible last week. They failed the eye test, but their season stats are above average on the defensive side of the ball. The one thing is Cutler needs all of his weapons to be a good go here. So we're just going to sit tight at a B on Cutler. Running back Matt Forte, B+. Forte automatically gets a B just for being Forte. His pass catching alone is going to give him the edge here. Tampa Bay has a solid run defense, but the running back coming out of that flat, Forte, is great at catching the pass and doing great things with his legs. So look for Forte to be used heavily. I'm going to skip right over and hit Alshon Jeffrey here. Watch his injury report. If he goes, I'm going to give him a B-. The hamstring thing is a scare for me. If someone is coming off of that, it's an issue for me because you never know when they could re-injure it. If it gets tight, they're coming out of that game. Especially in the championship round, we've seen how bad these injuries mid-game are killing people's rosters. So watch out for that and monitor his progression throughout the rest of the week. Wide receiver Eddie Royal, I'm going to give him a B-. This guy needs to step up. If Jeffrey is going out, it's going to be a bad game. He's not a number 1 or not a number 2, so Eddie Royal, desperation play at best. Tight end Zach Miller, I love his return and his ability to get in the game. He has 6 targets in the last 2 games. There's a good chance against the Bucs here as they've been favorable matchup against the tight ends, but they allow very few tight ends to get actually touchdowns. So Zach Miller, I'm going to give a B2 as well. He's probably going to get the yards, but may fail to get in the end zone. On the Bucs side of the ball, quarterback Jameis Winston, I'm going to give him a C. It's not a good game to start him here if you have to. The Bears are number 3 in pass defense, and if there's no Vincent Jackson, there's no one left who can reliably catch the ball. Running back Doug Martin, he's going to get an A-. He's having a great season, a great return, especially in those contract years. And I think he's the best play on the team this week. While the Bears have a good pass defense, they do have a terrible run defense. So give Doug Martin a very confident A- start here. I expect he and Sims to have a large workload. Speaking of Sims, I'm going to give him a B. I expect him to be involved in the passing downs and is a good relief to Dougie Fresh, so he'll probably get, 10 touches or so. Wide receiver Mike Evans, B-. Somebody has to catch it, but it's not likely him. It breaks my heart to watch him consistently drop passes over and over. He has now dropped more passes than he's caught. He's at 49% of his targets that are caught. So it's a heck of a gamble, especially if you're in the finals. If I had Mike Evans on my roster, I would not start him in my championship. I would look for a flex elsewhere who is going to catch the ball, and that's where it just breaks my heart. VJax, he's doubtful. He didn't practice at all on Wednesday. Check back on Friday to see what's going on with that, but don't count on VJax. Austin Seferian-Jenkins, he's a C. As much as we want him to be good, it looks like that week 1 performance was just a fluke, and then the injury. Now he's back. The reality is that time lost really hurt his development with the rest of the team.
One more matchup from each of us, Brian, before the pop quiz. My next matchup, Carolina at Atlanta. On the Panthers side, Cam Newton is an easy A. Don't get cute. The Panthers don't appear to be planning to rest him much, if at all, prior to the playoffs. No quarterback in the league is hotter than Cam is right now. Panthers running backs. That includes Mike Tolbert. That includes Cameron Artis-Payne, and that includes that other guy. Oh, yeah, Fozzie Whitaker. I'm leaving them all on the bench. Good luck trying to figure out who produces and who doesn't. Ted Ginn is an A, torched the Falcons in Week 14 for 120 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Dude's on a roll. You'd be wise to continue riding that wave to a fantasy championship. Devin Funchess, a C+, only worth starting if you have nobody better for your flex spot, but you could certainly do worse. Philly Brown, a C. I give him the same exact thing as Funchess. I just like him a little bit less. Greg Olson is an A. Gotta start this guy. Money in the bank as long as he's healthy enough to be active. Over to the Falcons side, Matt Ryan, I'm leaving on the bench this week. Considering what the Panthers did to him just a couple short weeks ago, he's not worth the risk in the fantasy championship. Devontae Freeman is a C+. He's usually good for 100 combo yards in recent weeks, but trending down in terms of getting into the end zone. A tough task this week against the Panthers' run defense will not help him. Julio Jones, the only wide receiver I'll mention, he gets a B. He should be targeted a ton like he was in the Week 14 loss. He's a volume play with not a ton of upside, maybe a little. Jacob Tamme, I'm also leaving on the bench. That's it for that matchup.
All right, on to the Colts-Dolphins. Quarterback Matt Hasselbeck, D. Too far injured. You can't risk it. It sounds like he's going to try and play, but let's get over it. I mean, he's old. One bad fall, it's all over, and your championship is toast. So don't even try. Don't even think about it. Running back Frank Gore, B+. The defense isn't great in Miami, and Gore should have plenty of touches with an ailing and aged QB. They're going to need to move the ball fast out of his hands to minimize the risk of getting Hasselbeck knocked out of the game. So, by virtue, Gore will be getting a lot of touches. Wide receiver T.Y. Hilton, I'm going to give him a B. Short, quick slants are his best bet. Likely nothing over 20 yards here. Still has the ability, and he's a go in my fantasy football league. Good grief, Moncrief, he's going to get a B. Finally got a touchdown last week, and quite a few. I think 5 or 6 he hadn't had one. So, glad to see him back in the TD category. The Dolphins are 31st worst pass defense, so I like Moncrief. I think he's a good start, and he's got my confidence as well. So I like Moncrief this week. On to the Dolphins side of the ball, quarterback Ryan Tannehill, C+. Not a relevant fantasy option here. Everybody thought he was good. This was his big breakout year. He just does not throw enough touchdowns and throws nearly a pick a game. And who knows what's going on with the Dolphins' offense? You never know. Is there a new offensive coordinator this week by chance? Yep, I don't think so. Who knows at this point? Running back Lamar Miller, he had 9 carries last week against a terrible Chargers run defense, so he's basically in the same situation. Are you going to take the gamble and put Lamar Miller out there? It's all about consistency for me in the championship round. I'm not ready to risk it on something like Lamar Miller, 1 week having 21 touches and then 9 touches the next. I still give him a B+, though, because statistically he should have a great game, but my gut says no. Wide receiver Jarvis Landry, B+. He has the most promise to break away with a big touchdown here for the game, and punt returns is always a factor. Kenny Stills, I'm going to give him a B-. He actually averages 18 yards per catch. That's the highest on the entire team. So watch for him to increase his targets this week if Rashard Matthews can't go. He is on an injury watch. He didn't practice on Wednesday. So follow it through, and if he is out, watch out for wide receiver Kenny Stills. There is also no tight end of value on the Dolphins roster. So you know what time it is now, Andy.
It's time for everybody's favorite segment of the 515 Fantasy Football Show, particularly yours, Brian.
Absolutely.
The pop quiz. 3 questions that will leave Brian singing Neil Diamond songs in the key of E sharp. So
we'll see.
You get any wrong, I'm going to make you sing Sweet Caroline on this show.
Oh, that'll be so much fun. I can't wait.
Question number 1, Brian. Who has been the biggest surprise in all of fantasy football circa 2015?
Can I give you 2 answers?
If one of them's right, I'll allow it.
Okay. So I will say one of the biggest fantasy surprises, Devonta Freeman.
Mm-hmm.
And I will even throw in Gary Barnidge. Because if you think about Devonta Freeman, he wasn't even the starter. It was Tevin Coleman at the beginning. And some people just took an injury, what the heck draft in your 15th round and struck major gold. Or you look at someone like Barnidge, who nobody knew about in anything, and he's rivaling Gronk for overall tight end. So those are huge fantasy impacts that probably weren't even drafted.
Both decent answers, but the correct answer here is Cam Newton.
No.
Not only in terms of the success he has brought to his team via their as-yet undefeated record of 14-0, but also the fact that there's a very good chance he ends up fantasy's #1 overall scorer. He's currently less than 6 points behind Tom Brady in standard scoring leagues. If you will recall, Brian, I gave you a pop quiz question way back when Kelvin Benjamin suffered his season-ending knee injury. The question was, I believe at the time, how many touchdown passes do you think Cam Newton will end up with? Both of us, I believe, guessed less than 20.
Yeah, and, as much as I dislike Cam Newton, I've never been a big Cam Newton guy, but way to go to him. He better be the MVP of the league this year. There's no reason he shouldn't. And just look at what he's doing. Like, he is just figuring things out. It really shows the growth of his character. I mean, there were so many character concerns coming out of college and everything. And Ron Rivera should get Coach of the Year. The things he's been able to do with Cam Newton, personally and professionally, are just phenomenal.
It has been pretty unbelievable to watch this season, and I keep my fingers crossed each and every day. They've got positive matchups versus Atlanta and Tampa still to come before the playoffs. If they can roll this thing undefeated, go all the way through without getting beat, Mercury Morris might finally shut his pie hole.
Yeah, I hope they do it. I'm really excited to watch them.
Indeed. Question number 2. I had a moment of clarity last weekend while I watched my dynasty team get its butt kicked by Phillip Rivers, David Johnson, and Antonio Brown. I, like many Lamar Miller owners, have been extremely frustrated more often than not this season with how the Dolphins coaching staff have utilized his talents. Head coach Joe Philbin was shown the door. So was offensive coordinator Bill Lazor. And then, in Week 14, Miller runs for over 60 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half of his game. He barely sees the field in the second half. Week 15, only a total of 18 snaps for Miller. My question is, since Miami certainly doesn't seem to want him, where do you think he will end up in 2016?
Well, you have to look at, obviously, need. So the Ravens need a running back. Forset's old and injured, so they need somebody there. You can't count out the Patriots, a divisional opponent. They know people. You could even make a case for Seattle right now if you wanted to with Lamar Miller. Or, you know what? Yeah, I think those would be my top candidates. Maybe the Jets, Chris Ivory's kind of, he's having a great year this year, but what about next? He was never a really starting running back caliber anyways.
There really is no wrong answer to this question. It's more of an opinion than anything else. I think the Patriots are sort of always in play when we're talking about theoreticals like this. But my best answer to this question, Dallas.
You think so? I think that's where Forte's going to go.
You really think that, huh?
Yeah, why not?
He's too old.
Yeah, he's old, so what?
Well, I mean, that means that they're not going to pay him feature-back money.
I think Forte's a realist, and he knows the damage he could do on that team with a healthy Romo and Dez and everybody again.
I think Lamar Miller is the second coming of DeMarco Murray in Dallas.
Could be, absolutely.
That's what I think. Interesting. Do you realize, even with all the problems Lamar Miller has had this year in dealing with inept coaching and whatever else, he's still, I want to say he's like borderline top 5 in standard leagues at the running back position. Isn't that crazy?
That's ridiculous.
That's how talented this guy is. I don't know why nobody else sees it but fantasy people, and we're screaming it from the mountaintops. So there you go. Question number 3. With LaShawn McCoy likely out this week, which Bills running back do you roll the dice on in a killer matchup versus those Cowboys?
Carlos Williams. I mean, he's proven that he can do it. He's proven reliable beyond any means, and he's never really done anything to make himself look a fool, so I think he can do it.
Yeah, the answer is Carlos Williams. Mike Gillislee broke free for a long touchdown last week, but otherwise has done virtually nothing in comparison to Williams' body of work here in 2015. Not too shabby this week, Mr. Bryan.
Yeah. I like the opinion ones. I can't get those wrong.
Well, we're getting down to the end of the season here and our last couple of shows, so I got to be creative, right? On to the matchups. The second half of them, New England at the New York Jets, begin on the Patriots side with Tom Brady, who's a B+. He threw for 355 yards and 2 touchdowns in Foxborough last time these two teams met. Despite all the injuries to his pass catchers, he continues to find a way to get it done, both for his team and for yours. I almost consider boosting him into A territory if Edelman returns this week. Keep your eye on that situation. For the running backs, James White is clearly the better fantasy producer of the two. He gets a B this week. Despite being very tough to run on, the Jets have allowed production to pass-catching backs like White, who's been on a roll since Deion Lewis went down. Brandon Bolden, I'm leaving on the bench. It's safe to leave both him and Steven Jackson there. Julian Edelman. This is a big if he's active, and right now, I think he probably will be. I'd grade him a B in this matchup. Coming back from injury, they say he's been looking good in practice, but when you get out there in game speed and you're cutting and you're moving around and getting hit, who knows what could happen. But I still think he's got enough talent there, and if the coaches and doctors and such really feel like he's ready to go, I give him a B. Brandon LaFell has been questionable all week. We're not sure he's going to go, but if he does, he's more of a C+ type of starter. If he visits Revis Island this weekend, he becomes unstartable. It's tough to say how this will go, but if I'm you, I'm leaving him on the bench this week. Rob Gronkowski obviously is an A. On to the Jets side, Ryan Fitzpatrick, a B. With the Jets' running game floundering as of late, look for Fitzmagic to take the bull by the horns and make some plays with his arm this weekend. The Patriots rank in the top 10 in the league against the pass, but have shown they are beatable against superior talent like the Jets' receivers. For the running backs, Bilal Powell is a B+ in this game. He's got 2 things going for him, Brian. Number 1, game flow. The Pats should be playing out front for much of, if not all of Sunday's game. When that's the case, Powell gets a lot more work than Ivory does. The number 2 thing he's got going for him is momentum. Not many supplemental running backs have excelled like he has since midseason, both in the run game and the passing game. So he's a better play this week than Chris Ivory, who I give a C to. For the receivers, Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker, I'm giving both B+ this week, both no-brainers. And for Marshall, despite the tepid box score from the two teams' earlier meeting, I like him this week. I think Eric Decker has just been lights out all season long, so there's no way you're benching him. And there's no fantasy tight end for the Jets this week.
Did you ever think you would be hyping up Bilal Powell on
No,
a
and in
fantasy
fact,
program?
I own Ivory in one of my leagues, and it's driven me absolutely insane to watch him out-produce, out-touch, out-everything Chris Ivory. It's very, very frustrating.
I agree. Texans, Titans. I was hoping Hoyer rolls around and gets his brain straight, but it doesn't look like it, so that means it's Whedon times. I'm going to give Whedon a C+ here. Regardless of the Titans' defense, it's still Whedon. But Houston has a good wide receiver or two, if you haven't heard. Hoyer was my big call early in the season. It just breaks my heart that he can't get back from this concussion quickly. So Whedon, C+, but if you have to, you need to look elsewhere if you're even considering Whedon. Onto the running backs on the Texans, Blue, Grimes, and Polk. As far as I'm concerned, they're either B's or B minuses. They're all dangerous starts because you never know who's going to get the big hit or the breakaway pass. While Blue is the supposed starter, they all see the field in the same amount, just in different roles. Wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, he's always an A. It doesn't matter who's throwing the ball. He's rarely shut down and never shut out. His worst game this year was 36 yards, and then after that it's in the 50s and 60s. So he's been spot on. You heard about Cecil Shorts in the headlines, so wide receiver Nate Washington, he's going to get the increase in workload and could be a big bonus if they roll coverage over to Hopkins if Cecil Shorts doesn't go. So watch for Nate Washington there. On to the Titans, quarterback Zach Mettenberger is a D for don't. Houston has a number 2 pass defense, and he was a backup to a rookie for a reason. So do not, in any way, shape, or form, start Mettenberger. If you have to, start Whedon over Mettenberger. Running back Antonio Andrews, B. By sheer workload, he should get some action, but temper expectations. and as the Texans do need to hold on to the division, so I expect them to beef up their run defense and start playing like they've been drafted. Wide receiver Harry Douglas and Dorial Green-Beckham, neither of these guys you can start in your championship regardless. Bad situation all around. Not to say they won't score, but it's that consistency thing to count on in your championship round. Tight end Delaney Walker, I'm going to give him a B. He easily is the go-to and best touchdown option on this roster. I really wanted to give him an A, but regardless of his performance last week and a couple of weeks, it's going to be tough. And, Mettenberger and the way Houston covers on pass defense, it's just going to be a tough start for Delaney Walker this week.
Cleveland at Kansas City on the Brown side. Johnny Manziel is a C. Only if you're out of options would you consider him in the fantasy championship. Isaiah Crowell, a C+. He's getting much of the early down work, but up against a Chiefs front seven that allows only 92 rushing yards per game. They've only given up 6 rushing touchdowns on the season. It's not a great matchup. And for that reason, Duke Johnson's also a C+. More the pass-catching specialist here. I'm not feeling great about the matchup, so if I have better options, I'd probably take a better look at them. Travis Benjamin is a C. The Chiefs are a very stout pass defense. Benjamin likely will see a lot of cornerback Sean Smith, who's been a shutdown guy for much of the year. Gary Barnidge is our boy. He's a B+. I'm not benching him no matter what, nor would I. I love the fact that national pundits who didn't start talking about Gary Barnidge until probably weeks 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there when he actually started scoring touchdowns, are trying to take credit for Gary Barnidge.
Yeah, they have no idea. Clearly, we need to send them some of our time-stamped and dated recordings to let them know who the big cats were.
I went back just to see exactly what I said, and I honestly did call that. I said, he is a guy to keep an eye on. Big-time sleeper here, Gary Barnidge. Write it down.
Paid.
Love it. That's probably my best call of 2015 is Gary Barnidge. There you have it. Kansas City, onto the Chiefs side, Alex Smith, a B. His ceiling is capped by the fact that the Browns have been so bad against the run. He might not have to throw as much here. Still, he's probably likely good for 200 to 250 yards and 1 to 2 passing touchdowns, give or take. Charcandrick West, he gets an A in this one. Great start. No matter if Ware steals touches or not, the Browns have allowed the second most rushing yards in the league this season and 11 rushing touchdowns. Spencer Ware, I mentioned, I'm giving him a C+. He's still not 100%. He might be worth a desperation flex if we find out he's active on Sunday in the hopes that the Chiefs blow out the Browns and he gets into the end zone. Jeremy Maclin, a B+. He's a good bet to snag at least one touchdown from Smith against the Browns defense that have given up the third most touchdowns to opposing receivers on the year. Albert Wilson also in the mix as a C+. He's gotten more involved as the season has progressed. He's not a guy you can count on, but he may surprise you if a flex is needed. Travis Kelce is a B. He's got low-end tight end 1 potential, considering this is a very positive matchup.
The Jacksonville Jaguars go rolling into the Saints' house again. Quarterback Blake Bortles, A, start of the week. I am a big fan of Bortles here. So if he's out there, if he's hunting, watch out for Bortles. He's going to have a cake defense to pick apart. They gave the Lions a nice pad to their scoring average. Bortles is much more consistent, and the Saints are bad. Bortles has 31 touchdowns. I would love to see him hit 40 this year. That'll be pretty awesome, especially looking back and what we thought about the Jaguars at the beginning of the season. Running back Denard Robinson, he's playing just fine. He has 4 yards per carry. Sprained foot could be something to watch. Makes me a little scared to start in his position, but I'm going to give him a B+ anyways. Be careful, though. Watch that injury report heading through Friday. Wide receiver Allen Robinson, he's going to get an A. No need to listen to me. He's an obvious start and as obvious as Antonio Brown anymore. Wide receiver Allen Hurns, I'm going to give him a B. I expect Hurns to play and get plenty of work, but don't be surprised if he gets a few breaks in here or there because of that previous injury. And he's been battling them all year, so I expect him just, full bore. But I'd take him a little bit down a notch over Robinson. So I'm looking for the Jaguars to light up the scoreboard, and I'd love to see him throw up 50 on the Saints. It'd be awesome. No tight end of value on the Jaguars that I'm going to put into my rotation for the championship here. On to the Saints, quarterback Drew Brees, B+. He has 28 touchdowns and 4,100 yards. Easily a down year for Brees, but this could be his norm now. He had some good numbers late in the Lions game, and I expect nearly the same here. He was off to a rough start, but only in the second half did the Saints really get revved up. Running back Tim Hightower, big surprise here. He's going to get a B, middle-of-the-road defense, and a skewed 3.5 yards per carry. I can't go outrageous, but he's not a bad start here. I don't think Hightower's going to knock it out of the park, but he's not going to be terrible. I think he could have 80 and a touchdown this week. Wide receiver Cooks, he's going to get an A. Crazy plays last week, fighting to get those catches. Same for him this week as he gets 20% of the targets. Surprised to see Colston even make it in the end zone last week. He's going to get a B-. He has some good plays, came through in some tough times, but he's not the focus of the offense anymore. Wide receiver Willie Snead, he gets a B. Still hauls in 15% of the targets and has 20 targets in 2 games, so that's pretty awesome. He had 8 last week and 12 the week before. Tight end Ben Watson, he's the only Saints pass catcher to start every single game. So tight end Ben Watson. B+, he is a red zone threat and is second in targets on the Saints roster.
Brian, I think I figured it out.
Uh-oh.
I know who your Jared Cook is.
Who's my Cook? Watson?
Your Jared Cook is Julius Thomas.
Julius Thomas, yeah, no. He's out in my category because every time I give him a grade, he donks me every time. And then when I just think
him, he's too good to leave on the bench this week.
It's just one of them. It's all about consistency, man. And
you hate him.
I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah.
He's burned you in the past, and you will not give him a grade.
Yeah, pretty much. He's been chapping me all year, and I've had enough.
I've had people actually come up to me and ask me what my problem with Jared Cook is. How funny is that? Like they know that I hate Jared Cook with a passion. Anyway, on to my next matchup, Green Bay at Arizona. On the Packers side, Aaron Rodgers, I'm giving him a B. We're about to find out just how valuable the Honey Badger was to the Cardinals' pass defense. I believe Aaron Rodgers may be due for a renaissance of sorts this week. Better than he's been, maybe not gangbusters, but serviceable if you want to play him this week. James Starks and Eddie Lacy, I'm not in love with either of the Packers runners on the road against the league's 4th best defense against the run. I'll give each a C grade, begrudgingly. Randall Cobb, a B. He should move around enough to avoid shadow coverage from Patrick Peterson. Likely to see team-high targets in what could be a shootout here. James Jones, a C+. He's done virtually nothing since that game in Minnesota over a month ago, but he still has to be somebody you consider in a game like this. Richard Rodgers, a C. I would consider him this week only in a pinch. He seems to only get those red zone targets and only once in a while. All right, over to the Cardinals side. Carson Palmer, a B+. Despite the emergence of David Johnson and that vaunted Cardinals running game, I still think Palmer will give you more in Week 16 than he did last week, and he's the reason some people are out of their fantasy playoffs. He did nothing last week. David Johnson gets an A-. The matchup isn't nearly as tasty as it was last week, but he's still a pretty good bet for 80 to 120 combo yards and at least 1 score. Michael Floyd, a B+, playing at a very high level as of late, someone I'd strongly consider despite facing a top 10 pass defense. Larry Fitzgerald, a B, old, reliable, only missing all the touchdowns he was scoring earlier in the year. John Brown, a B-. He's having some ball security issues lately, still has the skill set to grab a long one for a score, but making it tougher on his owners who are counting on him in a big spot. The tight end's Darren Fells. I'm going to leave him on the bench. Those Packers linebackers are tough, and they're fast.
Rams Seahawks, quarterback Case Keenum is a starting quarterback in the NFL, but not on anybody's roster. Running back Todd Gurley, B-. I expect the Rams to get shut out or have 6 points. It's going to be a bad go. He's going against the 3rd best run defense and has trouble with tough matchups. You're likely still going to get a start here because he is Todd Gurley, but you really need to take a pause here and think about it. Explore your other options. Gurley is probably not going to have a huge day here. I wouldn't count on it. Obviously, the game flow, they're going to be forced to pass. It's just there's a lot of factors here to why Gurley is not going to have a good day. Your wide receivers, Britt and Austin, they're both sits. They don't even have 1,000 yards combined, and Antonio Brown has over 1,300 himself. So there's a comparison as to the Rams wide receivers. They were fun to to kind of play around with, but you never want to take them to prom. So, and no tight end of value there, Mr. Cook. Speaking of. On to the Seahawks, quarterback Russell Wilson is red hot, and he's been playing at an elite level over the last 4 weeks and should continue to do so at home against the inept Rams. He has over 3,500 yards and 29 touchdowns. Not crazy statistics, but if you consider he's pretty much done all of it in the last 4 or 5 weeks, he's doing pretty dang good. Running back Bryce Brown or Kristen Michael, both are B-minuses for me, and here's why. Look at how Wilson is playing. It is definitely a pass-first offense now, and I would expect them to keep it this way. Neither running back looked great, and passing is working, so I don't expect them to all of a sudden switch the playbook around to where beast mode was running it and they're doing 60% run. It's not going to happen anymore. It's a different team right now without those running backs in there, so let Russell Wilson do what he is certainly well paid to do. Wide receiver Doug Baldwin, I'm going to give him a B+ this week. He's going to continue his hot streak, but I couldn't put him over the top because of the hamstring issue, so he may lose a step if it gets tight. He has 10 touchdowns in 4 weeks, which is absolutely awesome. Wide receiver Tyler Lockett, he's someone who's kind of leaping over a curse right now, and I think should be the number 2. He's still looking good in your flex. He has 200 yards and 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, so these guys are really just having a blast. It's fun to watch the Seahawks really get with it and play a different style of football this year. Makes you wonder if they would go back to the Super Bowl and pass again. Now, if Russell Wilson is playing the way he is now, there is no tight end of value on the Seahawks roster for me because
that's a really funny question you just asked right there. Very funny.
Well, would you, given the situation you have right now, and you could take Russell Wilson as he is right now and put him back to 9 months ago?
Nah, I'm still running beast mode. Sorry.
Yeah?
Yep, still running beast mode.
All right.
Good question, though. Very good question. You got me thinking. One more matchup from each of us. The bargain bin is right around the corner. Sunday Night Football, New York Giants, Minnesota Vikings. On the Giants side, Eli Manning is a B-. With Odell Beckham out this week, I don't have high hopes for him against a Vikings secondary that has played most opposing quarterbacks tough this season. Shane Vereen, a C+. I'm guessing he'll get in on a lot of action in the short passing game. Rashad Jennings, a C. The Vikings are getting healthier, and if nose tackle Linval Joseph is back in the lineup this Sunday night, Jennings becomes a benchable commodity. Ruben Randall, a C+. He's found his way into the end zone the past couple of weeks. He becomes Manning's de facto wide receiver 1 with Beckham out. Should see plenty of Xavier Rhodes in coverage this week. Advantage Vikings. Hakeem Nicks, I'm leaving on the bench. Will Tye, a B-. He's been a pretty consistent target for Manning and company, so I kind of like him here. The Vikings have been torched by several tight ends this season. Teddy Bridgewater is a B+. We all saw what he did to the league's third-best pass defense, the Bears, last week. Imagine what he could accomplish against the league's bottom-ranked pass defense, the Giants, this week. Adrian Peterson's an A. Sounds as if his ankle is healthy enough to play on, and this is a great matchup against the Giants defense that allows nearly 115 yards per game to opposing runners and given up 10 rushing touchdowns on the season. Stephon Diggs is a B. He came back to life last week against a tough Bears secondary. Let's see what the rookie can do for an encore against the league's worst pass defense. Mike Wallace, a desperation C. He's been wildly inconsistent this season. Kyle Rudolph, also a C. He's not doing enough week to week to help much in your quest for a fantasy championship, so I'd probably just look elsewhere at tight end.
We have some Monday Night Football action this week. The stakes are high as far as the teams are concerned, but I don't expect this to be some crazy scoring, great football being played on Monday night. Bengals-Broncos. Quarterback A.J. McCarron, I'm going to give him a B-. He did just fine. He's been playing okay, but he's playing Denver in Mile High. That's a very tough situation for A.J. McCarron to go play in, so tempering expectations this week, B-. Running back Giovanni Bernard, B-. Bad performance against a terrible team last week. Same woes this week. Jeremy Hill, C+. Even though he did have those 2 touchdowns that saved his fantasy day last week, he had 19 touches to Gio's 18. They have an even split going on with Denver. high altitude, bad for running backs not used to it. I can't give any of those guys my tip of the hat confidence go. Wide receiver A.J. Green, I'm going to give him a B. Even though we've seen Denver get torched numerous times, I think they're going to learn their lesson this week. They're going to play tough. They have to. This is a must-win for them. But it's just going to be one of them. They're going to have to fight for every inch. It's going to be great. I'm going to give A.J. Green a B, likely because of A.J. McCarron, not because of A.J. Green. Wide receiver Marvin Jones, B+. He's going to benefit playing opposite of A.J. Green as they roll the coverage over to him. He's likely going to find himself in single coverage. I expect a bigger day out of Jones than Green here because of the extra attention. Tyler Eifert looks like he's out. Unfortunately, he was having such a great season. The Broncos side of the ball, quarterback Brock Osweiler. We've predicted it. Peyton's done, but I want to read you these stats here. Brock Osweiler completing 60% of his passes. Peyton Manning has completed 59% of his passes. Brock Osweiler has 8 touchdowns. Peyton Manning has 9 touchdowns. Brock Osweiler has 4 interceptions. That's 13 less than Peyton Manning has, and only half of the games played.
Wow.
So people who are sitting there saying, wow, you got to bring Peyton back for the playoff run, look at the statistics. And it is not, if you covered up the names, you would put Brock Osweiler under Peyton Manning's statistics this year. It is crazy when you look at them, compare them side by side. So, Brock, I'm going to give Brock a B here. Running back C.J. Anderson and Ronnie Hillman, both of them, they're just kind of a package deal for me at this point. 160 yards separates them both and 3 touchdowns out of a whole season worth of work. Not much difference when you look at the season as a whole. Hillman B, Anderson B- because of the usage and how they're used in the offense. Wide receiver Demaryius Thomas, he gets 29% of the targets, still a legit threat, but he has a case of the drops lately. Still a B and should be good to go. Wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders, B+. He is better off than the downfield threat. He catches more and is able to run well. I like him more with Brock as a quarterback than I do Demaryius Thomas. I love Emmanuel Sanders right now. He is doing good things. And I don't have any tight end of value on that Monday night matchup.
All right, well, if you need a swing for the fence this week and you need help at either quarterback, running back, or receiver, we might have some players you might want to pay attention to that might be available on your waiver wire. Chances are they are. So, guys, you can just pick up and plug right in and hope for some decent fantasy production from. Your quarterback in the bargain bin, Brian.
All right, I'm going out on a limb. I'm swinging for the fences. Quarterback Jimmy Clausen. He had 300 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. He can do the same thing this week just by sheer volume. He's going to have to throw the ball 50 yards. I really like his chances of throwing up 302 again.
My quarterback's Kirk Cousins. This game has all the makings of a shootout as the NFC East is on the line. Deshaun Jackson returns to Philly, and neither team can really stop anyone's passing game. Cousins, surprisingly, the league's most efficient quarterback and has been very steady the second half of the season, so I like him. Who's your running back?
My running back is Joique Bell. I'm going to disagree with you. In your matchup, you said sit him. I say start him. With Abdullah fumbling in critical situations, look for the bruiser at home in front of a hometown crowd where he used to be a security guard. Big things coming from Joique Bell this Sunday.
Carlos Williams is mine. I mentioned earlier he's my pick to grab the majority of LaShawn McCoy's fantasy production. He's averaging 6 yards per carry. He's scored 7 total touchdowns this season, including 2 through the air. Mike Gillislee, cute story, had a long touchdown last week, but Williams is the guy you want if you want to swing for the fences at running back. How about your receiver?
Wide receiver Kenny Stills. Take a look out there on your waiver wire. He's likely out there. Any championship roster likely dropped him just to load up on other positions that they were thin at. He actually averages those 18 yards per catch, highest on the team, and he's going to get that increase in targets this week. So look out, take a floater on Stills if you need to.
A floater. Kmar Aiken is mine. No team gives up more fantasy production to the wide receiver position than Pittsburgh does. A close second, the Baltimore Ravens. So I think there will be plenty of fireworks to go around in this game. Kmar Aiken gets a ton of targets no matter who's under center. In case you missed any part of the show, feel free to listen on demand anytime via iTunes, Stitcher, the Libsyn website. 515 Fantasy Football again is on Facebook. We are also on Twitter at 515 Fantasy. Brian and I love to help answer tough lineup questions as you get into your fantasy championship this weekend. So feel free to reach out anytime. Brian, unfortunately, we don't have any time for you to add anything other than
Quick dumps?
there you have it. Thanks for listening, no matter how you found us. Big thanks to our friends at 1350 ESPN Radio in Des Moines as well. We wish you the very best of luck in your fantasy championship. Merry Christmas. This is 515 Fantasy Football.